Hi, I'm Mickey Heinle. I'm Director of Business Development for Altius Healthcare Consulting Group. At Altius, we focus on improving financial and operational performance of healthcare organizations, providing data-driven productivity improvement, along with education and support through leadership development to implement and sustain long-lasting strategic change. And today I'm speaking with Dr. Tabitha Hapeman, she has quite a resume here, so I'll see if I can get this all right. Enterprise Director, Utilization Management and Clinical Appeals at WVU Medicine, as well as being a psychiatric nurse practitioner and an adjunct faculty member at Wilkes University. Hi, Dr. Hapeman. Thanks for
Hello
joining me
there.
today.
Very nice to be here today. Thank you so much.
So excited to discuss the importance of leadership development in healthcare and the important lessons that you've learned throughout your own journey in your career in healthcare.
I'm
You've
excited.
chronicled
These are all my passion areas. So, yes.
You've chronicled these experiences in your book, Upwards 10 Essential Leadership Lessons, and I am so excited to talk about it with you. I love this book.
Oh, thank you so much.
Tell us about your journey from when you were first an undergrad, entering undergrad, starting as a communications major, and how you pivoted to becoming a nurse.
Sure. I think it actually starts even before that. So, my family, I come from a family of nurses. My grandmother was one of 8 children, 4 girls, 4 boys. All 4 girls are nurses, and all the boys married nurses. So, there's a long tradition of being in medicine in my family. And when I was growing up, I really thought I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't really know what that was going to look like, but I thought I really want to be in medicine. And of course, as we age, right, things change. Certainly, what we wanted to be when we were 4 years old is not what we want to be when we're 18. And I really loved writing as I grew up. So I thought when I was entering my undergrad college, I really want to go into writing. I want to be a writer. And so I was thinking, I'm going to go into journalism and communication. But always in the back of my mind, there was this desire I want to be in medicine. But I don't know, I did not know how to integrate those two things. What do I do as someone who loves to write, but also really wants to be in medicine? Those two things didn't seem to go together to me when I was 17, 18 years old. So I walked into my freshman orientation as a communications major. The semester hadn't started. This was a weekend before the semester starts. When you move into your dorm, everyone's all excited. And I walked into this very first freshman orientation, a big auditorium for everyone that was going into communications. And I looked around and I just thought, this is not where I'm supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be here at all. So I left that auditorium and I called my dad in a panic and I said, what am I supposed to be doing with my life? I'm 18. I'm supposed to make a decision right now for the next 60 years. What am I doing? And he said, Tab, you've always wanted to be in medicine. Email the dean of nursing. What are you thinking? So I did. I emailed her. I said, I'd really love to join your program if there's any
It was
seats
brave
left.
anyway, right? That was brave
I
too.
mean, nothing to lose at this point, right? I'm already there and the tuition's paid for this semester. And she accepted me that night. She sent me an email back and she said, welcome to the program. And
Oh
I
my.
walked into freshman orientation as a nurse the next day.
Uh,
And I've never looked back. There's definitely been moments of panic. Certainly, you don't really know what you're getting into, to be perfectly frank, when you start as a nurse, as an undergrad.
mhm.
But this entire time, I've realized this is where I'm supposed to be. And always that little inkling I'm supposed to be in medicine was very true.
I love that. As a communications major myself, I remember the auditorium and I remember all of that. Only for me, it was like, this is where I belong.
Right, this is where I
Yeah,
belong. And I think that feeling, that knowing of rightness is so critical to honor.
absolutely. And this book just really resonated with me. At Altius, we provide customized services to hospitals and healthcare solutions all over the nation, and our productivity and workforce optimization solutions they provide increased efficiency, sustained cost savings, and with that, we provide a leadership development program, and that includes education support and all the coaching that is required to encourage and make sure that the productivity performance measures succeed.
Sure.
So, I just hearing about all the information. Let's talk about relationship building, your radical openness that you talk about in the book, and change management. So in our
Sure.
leadership development program, we teach the importance of building those relationships.
Mhm.
Tell us about good morning.
Oh, good morning. So, as a new leader, and I think all of us fall into this trap, or at least I tell myself that all new leaders fall into this trap so I feel a little less lonely. We all want to accomplish something so much, right? In our very first leadership position or that opportunity that we're given, we're so driven and we want to do the things and we want to do all of the things right now. And we forget it's about the human connection,
Mhm.
right? It's not about driving outcomes. We can't drive outcomes. That's a myth. What we do is we inspire and empower people. Our people do the work. The work is the outcome, right? So I had it backwards, as a lot of new leaders do. So when I first got into leadership, my very first role, I was a team lead, which was what we called a supervisor of case management for about a 250-bed hospital. And I was so excited. I was working so hard. I was trying to do all of the things for all of the people. And one day my boss pulls me into her office and she says, Tab, when you come into work, you come in through the back door, you walk down the hallway, you come into your office, you sit down, you log in, and you start working. I said, yeah, I know, right? It's great. I'm
We're
so
so,
productive.
yeah.
And she said, no, you fool. You walk right by your team. I said, yeah, and like I'm going to work. This is what you pay me for, right? Like I come in and I go to work. Like, no, you have to stop and say good morning to your team. Your team doesn't feel like you support them. And so of course I start citing all of the measurables, all of the different ways I'm supporting the team. She's like, none of it matters. It has nothing to do with the measurables. How they perceive you is what matters.
Perception is
They,
reality. Yep.
that's right. You have to say good morning. And so, of course, being a very young leader, what do all young people do when we get news that we don't really want to hear? We rebel, right? So, of course, I come in the next morning and I'm like a little robot, like, good morning, team.
I
It is
heard
a
you,
pleasure to
but
see you. And then I go to my office. And it was a very much a fake it till you make it kind of thing. It's because I didn't really understand the why, right? It's so critical for all of us. If we want to be motivated to do something, we have to understand the why.
Mhm.
And in that moment, as a very new and immature leader, I didn't get it. So it took me a while to understand why this matters. And that those couple minutes of my day had no bearing whatsoever in my productivity, but had a very significant bearing in my team's productivity because they felt like I cared about them as people,
Mhm.
not just for what they could do for the
Right.
organization. Critical mismatch in our understanding as new leaders. I think is really common.
And that comes back to the leadership development that you have so
Absolutely. How can we
worked on.
prepare people for that before you're in that role?
Right.
What a radical concept, right?
Right. Speaking of
Yes,
radical, let's talk about radical openness because this just goes right to it.
sure. So, radical openness, I think, can mean so many different things to so many different people. But for all of us, we're the product of our experiences, we're the product of our environment, right? And so we have, through no fault of our own, kind of a narrow viewpoint, a narrow focus. The concepts, the ideas, our ideas of relationships, what they should look like, the ideas of how we do our work. All of it is already in a little box, even if we don't realize it's in a box. And so the concept of radical openness is just tearing down the walls of that box, right? What does that mean? Does it mean being open to new relationships, right? Does it mean introducing yourself to perfect strangers at conferences? Does it mean saying good morning to people, right? Before you sit down and start working? It's all about challenging our perceptions and challenging what we think is the right thing or the way it's always been done. It's about challenging the status quo internally for ourselves. And for me, that's radical openness.
I love that. That's amazing, and it's important. It is really important to challenge yourself to be open to new ideas
Mhm.
and also just be free flowing, and
Yes,
work with different personality types. That's another big piece of leadership development, right? Is trying to understand
absolutely.
all the different personality types and emotional intelligence around that,
Hmm.
and basically meeting them where they are
That's
and
right.
showing them together how you can get to where you want to go. Right.
Absolutely. And all of us, I think, when we meet new people, or at least a lot of us, we have this tendency, there's kind of an automatic barrier there, right? Of, I don't know you and you don't know me. So we're just going to kind of like nod politely at each other and move on.
Yeah.
But if we're radically open, if we go into that with the beneficence assumption, right? We're assuming that this person we're talking to has good intentions. Maybe
Mhm.
they don't, but if we give the benefit of the doubt ultimately and initially, that is going to lead to only good things, right? If that person didn't have beneficence or beneficence intentions, that's fine. We can move on, right? Probably no harm, no foul. But if we go up and assume, what does this person want from me, right? If that's the initial introduction in our own minds and relationships, we can't learn anything from that person. We can't build a genuine relationship.
Absolutely. You're exchanging concepts and energy even with each other. And if you
Absolutely.
come in with a blocked attitude, you just aren't going to ever get to where you need to be to build that relationship. There's always
That's
going to be
absolutely right.
a block there. And kind of that flows into the psychological flexibility that you talk about also in your book, which I think is so important. Something that we try to teach in our leadership development programs at Altius as well. You have to
Hmm.
be ready to adapt. Tell us a little
Absolutely.
bit more about how you feel about that.
We have to be ready to pivot at any given moment, right? So whether it's external pivoting of our company, right, kind of that macro perspective, or a micro perspective, an internal pivot. Only constant is change. We are never going to get away from it. We have this myth of status quo, but it
Mm,
really doesn't exist in healthcare. There's just constant reformatting, constant change. But even internally, so again, we all have like this box, right?
mhm,
And the box fits our experiences up until that point in our lives. And so we get kind of stuck, right? We get stuck in our own way. We get stuck in ruts. We get stuck in behavioral patterns. But most importantly, we get stuck in thinking patterns, right? So we tell ourselves all kinds of stories. And those thinking patterns, when we have these well worn grooves in our brain that we don't really challenge, that we're not willing to kind of bushwhack a new path,
mhm.
that's where we get psychological rigidity, where we think we know how we're perceiving the world and our perception is truth.
It's
And
always
we
been done that way, and that's how we do
absolutely,
it. Mhm.
this is, this person is like this, right? I am like this. This situation is this. That's being rigid. And so the opposite is psychological flexibility, where we can kind of hold something. It's almost like a metacognition. You can hold something in your hand and look at it and decide whether you want to keep it or not. So it
Mhm.
could be something like, my boss doesn't like me, right? Lots of people have this internal thought, my boss doesn't like me.
Mhm.
It's really based on our own insecurities and
Right.
vulnerabilities. It's most of the time not actually based on how our boss feels about us one way or the other. So that's the shift. Can we take this thought that we perceive as truth, my boss doesn't like me, and can we transition to taking a step back, looking at it and saying, why do I feel this way? Why do I perceive it this way? Have I actually picked up on some clues, some context clues? Maybe
Mhm.
I could ask some clarifying questions. Or am I looking at this through a lens of previous experience? Am I looking at this because I feel a little bit inadequate in this moment for whatever reason and I'm projecting that? It gives us an opportunity to question our assumptions and our beliefs and our thoughts. And then we can pivot, right? And that's where the flexibility comes in. All right, I've looked at it. I don't know that there's really truth to this concept. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to assume, again, assuming benevolence, right, on behalf of my boss. And I'm going to go into those conversations assuming my boss likes me. And let's see what happens with that assumption. Things might change.
Readiness to become a leader is something
Hmm.
else that you talk about. And there's a big gap often between a
Very
tremendous
often.
clinician who is
Yes.
fantastic, a leader among leaders, who then is tapped to be the leader of her department or his department. And they haven't had any training in management, in leadership, in any of the things that we've talked about before, really. Um, and so, how do we bridge that gap?
Such a great question. I think, I go back to a speaker I heard years ago, and she did this demonstration where she had a teeter totter. And there's technical skills and there's people skills, right? The soft skills. And a lot of folks that have been in the role, they have a lot of technical skills, right? Like that's the heavy side of the teeter totter.
Mhm.
The more soft skills, the leadership skills, how do you get people to buy in? Those things, those people naturally have less of, right? If
Mhm.
you're focusing on technical skills of how to get the alarms to stop going off on the bed, right?
Yeah.
Or how to get the IV to start infusing, why there's no bubbles in it, why isn't it going? If we're focusing on those things, right, those really technical things, we're not focusing on how do I identify key stakeholders in project management, right? How do I build relationships with peers in different departments? Those are not things that we're thinking of.
Or you're reacting to everything that's happening all
Absolutely.
around you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like when you're taking care of 6 patients and passing medications and keeping people safe, you're not
Mhm,
really thinking about those larger, big picture things of, I wonder what the strategy for my organization is going to be in the next 3 years, right?
mhm.
So there's the teeter totter. So once we put someone in a leadership position, whether it's a supervisor, a manager, or above, that teeter totter we think is going to shift, right? Because all of a sudden you don't need all of those technical skills anymore. You need some more of these leadership skills. But that transition doesn't happen naturally. We have to be very mindful of making that transition with people. We
Right,
can't assume that, yes, now magically you're going to be infused with all of this leadership knowledge and skill, and you're going to know how to do these things.
right,
There's a whole new subset of skills, also a whole new subset of technical skills. Just because you're an amazing person at the bedside doesn't mean you understand how to do a budget, doesn't mean you
right,
understand how to do a SWOT analysis, right?
exactly, right.
Brand new technical skills in addition to all of these other leadership skills
Mhm,
that we haven't really talked about up until this point. So
mhm,
I think identifying people that are hungry, that want to go through the leadership process, leadership is very difficult. Identifying those people early,
mhm,
mentoring them early,
mhm.
talking
Like a
through
succession plan. Mhm,
absolutely, talking through genuine succession planning. Not, yes, when I retire, this is your role. Congratulations preemptively. How are
mhm.
you actually preparing them for that day? Right?
Right,
Are you talking through, hey, here's how we make decisions at a high level. Here's how we strategize. How do you think about this concept? Are you bringing them along so that they're ready for that role when that day comes?
mhm. Exactly. I think at Altius, we like to say that we educate, empower, and elevate leaders to become the CEOs and CFOs of their own departments. And when
Yeah,
you take that apart and really think about it, it's so important because they need to act as though they are in charge and this is their and they own it and they have to have
absolutely.
all of that. And there's a lot of pressure with that
Hmm.
as well as learning all the skills that you just talked about. So let's talk about the importance of consulting in
Hmm.
leadership development. How do you feel about that
Yeah.
particular strategy of bringing in consultants?
I'm very much pro getting a third party kind of perspective, right? Anytime we're looking at a problem and we think, we're not meeting the mark, there's some kind of gap between where we are and where we'd like to be. The first question when we look at that gap is, do we have the expertise in house to solve the gap? Right? Do we have the expertise in house to figure out why there's a gap and how to close it and then how to sustain that
Mhm.
closing? Because that's another big thing that we struggle with. And if you do have the expertise, regardless of what it is, right? Whether it's something with direct care, whether it's something in the billing and revenue cycle, whether it's leadership development, if you have that expertise, great. How do we leverage that in our own organization? But if we look at the gap and we think we just don't know, right? We don't know how to close this gap. I don't know that we have the expertise or the bandwidth. Right?
Bandwidth. Yep, that's
Maybe
what I
we
was
have
going
the
to say.
expertise, but we don't have the bandwidth to do this.
Right.
That's a prime time. Bring someone else in, right? We
Mhm.
don't want to be insular. We don't want to be super siloed. We want to be, again, open, right? So, can we be open to, in this moment, we need some additional support. We need some
Right.
temporary help. And I think that's a great opportunity to bring in a consultant who, again, is going to be kind of an unbiased third party to give you a true assessment. Hey, I agree with this gap analysis, or you know what, I'm noticing a couple other things as well. Let's talk about these. And here's where we think we can help to bridge this gap.
Right, and we find too that we bring consultants bring an expertise of all sorts of other peer hospital groups,
Hmm.
so that you see what the best practices of other organizations are, and you can apply them into your organization. And we're finding, KPIs of productivity are actually the leading indicator of operational margin.
Yeah,
So, in order to improve that, you need to improve your productivity and lift your bottom dollar, basically.
that's exactly
So,
right. Yeah,
and then and leadership development has a huge part of that, because if you don't then implement leadership training, then the sustainability of that project, it doesn't go. And also back to
absolutely.
consulting too, a lot of times using within, like you had said, using the resources that you have within. There's a I want to feed myself as well. I've heard this from clients where they're like, well, that's great. I really don't have the extra time to provide this
Mhm.
training, but I will. I'll take it on. But then I'd like to get something out of it too, and then they can't as well. So
Yeah.
not only are you taking a piece out of the individual's particular day or week or month, but then you're taking away the ability for them to learn and grow as well. So consultants offer that as well.
Yeah. And a lot of times the willingness might be there, right? I find a lot
Yes.
of times willingness is not the problem.
Nope.
It's truly the bandwidth, right? So
Mhm.
in healthcare, one of our great mottos is do more with less, right? We've
Mhm.
been operating by this motto for a very long time. Nobody really has a ton of extra resources lying around.
Right.
We all operate fairly leanly. And
Mhm.
so sometimes you have leaders that have the expertise and the desire and the willingness, and
Mhm.
they simply cannot work these things into their day, right? Or they can't sustain it. Even if you can work it into your day for a season, you may be able to do it for a month or even a quarter. Sustainment becomes a serious issue. And I
Mhm.
think that's where, bringing in a consultant and having them say, hey, you know what, here's where we also see some opportunity. If we gain some additional, bandwidth in this area by making these improvements, maybe you could sustain this internally long term, right? But
Mhm.
you've got to have that a little bit of a support to
Yeah.
get to the place.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I like to think of consultants as coaches, right?
Yeah,
So you focus on unlocking potential, not just fixing individual problems as they are. You're looking at the whole big picture, and we help. That's what we do, right? As
yeah.
consultants, we help leaders focus on and foster a culture of change and improvement and accountability, but in an uplifting way, right? You want to make sure that everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction. I know that's kind of an overused phrase, but it really applies in healthcare, doesn't it?
It
Because
absolutely does. Yeah.
yeah, and culture, and that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. How do you feel that culture is affected and retention by leadership
Mhm.
development?
I
Have
think
you?
culture is key. I think it's all around culture. People know that healthcare is challenging, right? We entered a challenging industry. We want to be here, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this industry anymore. But we know it's tough.
Mhm.
Healthcare is not getting any easier, at least on the provider side. It's
Mhm.
only getting more challenging. And you can either look at those challenges as opportunities to fail forward and opportunities to get better, or you can look at those challenges as something that's really scary and very difficult to overcome.
Mhm.
Culture is what determines that perspective. So people will really, they'll come along with you on very difficult journeys if the culture is good.
Yes.
If the culture is something that people are like, I come here for a paycheck, right?
Mhm.
Or I come here for a paycheck for right now because I can't find another job. That
Mhm.
is not a culture where people are going to come along with you through difficult journeys.
Mhm.
That's a culture where the minute you hit something really challenging in the road, right? Whether it's you can't give annual bonuses this year, right? You can't give more than a 2% increase across the board this year. Maybe we have to close some of our beds on this one unit and we're going to have to transfer staff to another unit, whatever it looks like. If your culture is on the rocks, people will exit in that moment.
Right.
That's just what's going to happen. And
Mhm.
so suddenly now, not only are you already having typically financial burdens, right? But now you've also got the additional financial burdens of recruiting and
Right.
training, which is very, very expensive. It's one
And
and a half to two times or
oh,
more a person's salary just to replace them, right?
yes, I just read it's like 90 days to replace an RN. It's
It
a long
absolutely is.
process as
Yeah.
well.
It's a little over 90 days for a med surg nurse. I think the right now we're at like 94 and a half days to replace
Mhm.
a med surg RN. And so we compound our own problems, right? We become the author of our own suffering if
Mhm.
our culture isn't positive. So culture is really key. And I think if we have a culture that is truly, we're all here for the patient, we're all
Mhm.
here for each other, we genuinely care about each other as people, right?
Mhm.
Knowing that we're not all going to be, best friends and we don't have to be, but we have to care about each other genuinely as human beings, to work
Right.
with each other in an authentic way,
Mhm.
where
Absolutely.
all of us are here for the same reason.
Mhm, mhm, and consultants can help with that too, because how do I create this
Yeah,
culture? You know, what is this culture that
absolutely.
you speak of? I'm busy treating patients. I don't have
That's right.
time,
That's
and
right.
or I've not been trained to how to develop a culture. And when you have an amazing culture, the other thing is if you build it, they will come.
Yes.
You'll see people get attracted to your organization. They want to work with you. They're not leaving. They're telling their friends,
Yep.
and that's so. I think that culture is super important.
Yeah.
Um,
You just mentioned, the using or your people acting as your own recruiters, right?
mhm.
Your net promoter score, which is really what that is when we
Oh
look
my
at our
goodness,
engagement score or our
yes.
engagement surveys. That net promoter score is critical, right?
Mhm,
Our team members are our best recruiters
mhm,
by
mhm.
far. And that's
Yes.
what we want. You want a pipeline of applicants. You
Mhm.
want people already ready and waiting to come into your department because they know this is a great place to work.
Yes,
The
yes.
job doesn't have to be easy. People,
Mhm.
it's a myth. People don't even want easy jobs. They want jobs that are fulfilling.
They wanna feel
They
valued,
want to
they wanna
feel
feel part of a
valued.
team. Yes, mhm,
Yes,
all those things. So that kind of goes with the coaching. So,
absolutely.
consultants coach organizations through that so that they can build that pipeline and that net promoter score. That was an excellent point that you
Yeah.
made there. Oh my gosh. I could talk to you all day. I really could. You're just so engaging and the book. I've loved your insight into leadership development
Oh,
and
thank
the role
you.
of consulting. And we have talked a lot about healthcare in this conversation and this book. But this book is good for anyone. This book is good. It's a great gift, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Um, and it is it's applicable to leadership and your journey is so inspiring in it. So I really appreciate you coming and sharing your expertise with us as well as your story in this book. And I encourage everybody to get a copy. It's an easy read and it's just a fun read. Your personality shines right through. I felt as I first met you, I felt like I knew you already just from the book.
Oh,
So
that's so flattering. Thank you so much. And it was definitely a labor of love. And it's something that I kind of wish I had as a younger leader,
mhm,
or just
right.
someone to be very vulnerable in telling their stories of here are
Oh,
some of the mistakes I made, so you don't have to make those same mistakes. You can go
wow.
make your own unique mistakes, but you can avoid these. So I think that there's some of that. And these are just the lessons so far. Hopefully, we're all on a journey of continuous learning and continuous improvement. So I look forward to the next leg of my journey and learning some additional lessons to share with everyone.
And I know that you do a lot of speaking engagements as well. I am
Yeah.
sure I will run into you at some of the conferences that we will be sharing in the future. So
I
I'll look forward
sincerely
to it.
hope so.
Absolutely. And tell us where we can get the book.
Book is available right now on Amazon. You can order it through Barnes and Nobles as well, but I think the easiest way that we're all probably a little bit addicted to is that lovely one-click
It's
buy
fun.
on
Yeah.
Amazon. So, and you can get it in 2-day shipping if you have Prime, so it's still.
And I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you
And
so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
we'll see you soon.